who is the director for LPC. She's going to share a few bits of information with us, and I thought that I should also share this cute picture too while she talks. Can you see it?
There you go.
That's my baby.
That's her baby.
Baby. That is Lorraine. She was born in June. She's number 3 for us. Thanks, Jennifer. Hey, y'all, just wanted to give you a few updates from LPC. If you did not see the news, earlier this month, we moved to make Ag Media Summit a virtual event this year. That was a decision we made as Ag Media Summit leadership. We know that things are a little bit crazy this year with COVID. So if you didn't see that news, we'll be virtual same days as that we have postponed to November 16th and 17th. More information is at agmediasummit.com, or give me a shout if you have any questions. I'm sure everybody's wondering how much it costs. Member rates $195, non-member rates $395. If you haven't renewed your dues for this year, I'll still take them. Feel free to renew online, livestockpublications.com. And then also students, $99. Hey, Lisa, I see that you are on here. If you have any of your students at K-State that want to go to Ag Media Summit virtual, it's $99. But if you have like your ACT chapter or a department that wants to send a lot of students, we'll work with you on a bulk rate. Feel free to give me a call and we can chat about that, or just reach out to Tina, our conference planner. Other thing I wanted to mention is we are going to do a virtual career fair this year. It will be a little bit ahead of Ag Media Summit. September 18th is the day, and look for registration for that to open next week. If you would like to sponsor that career fair or be a part of it, please reach out to me or Samantha Kilgore at AAEA, and we can chat with you about that, as well as sponsoring Ag Media Summit. We've got quite a few sponsorships available on agmediasummit.com. Other than that, those are the main updates. Just wanted to make sure everybody knew that earlier this month we moved AMS to be a virtual event, kind of the way this year goes. But November 16th and 17th, and the information's at agmediasummit.com. Other than that, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay. All right, well, I think we're going to turn things over to Brett to get us started. And again, don't forget to drop those questions in the chat. This will be recorded and available on social media as soon as possible afterwards.
Slide popping up for everyone, all right? Great. Well, thanks so much for having us here today. Great to see a lot of familiar faces on here as well, and great to be on here with Jason. And always good to talk about these things. Specifically, I want to talk a little bit and repurpose a presentation that I recently gave at a regional manager summit that we had, and understanding reassurance as we're talking about a sales staff, and reassurance as we're talking about advertising. And so obviously it's a unique year. Obviously we're dealing with a lot of uncertainty out in the market. And at the end of the day, it's absolutely our job, like I'll talk about here in a little bit more detail, to help guide some of that back through. A bit about our entity, and I know you guys are probably pretty familiar with several aspects of it. It's great to have 2 regional managers on the call here this morning. Of course, we have 13 regional managers that serve as salesmen and association representatives for AAA and travel all across the nation and go to sales and work with customers. We also have a web services department, which maintains about 350 websites every year, a print services department, which concentrates on direct mail pieces, about 450 catalogs and various postcards and mailings from that team. Of course, the Angus Journal, 101 years old this year, publishing as a breeder audience, to a breeder audience every month. Also the Angus Beef Bulletin, which goes to 65,000 Angus bull buyers for 5 times a year. And then of course the digital advertising team. And then rounding all that out is certainly a business development team, which is a fairly new thing that we've done here in the last 9 months to concentrate on corporate customers as they support our mission at the association. So again, I'm going to kind of give this from the voice of speaking to a sales audience, kind of understanding that, it's absolutely our job and our duty, whether you're in sales or whether you're an editor or designer, to always be on the ready to provide reassurance as we're working with customers. At the end of the day, especially in times like this, when we're talking about a sales function, we're really offering security. And sometimes that's pretty easy to forget about. At the end of the day, we are helping people hedge their bets against disaster. And we give them every opportunity to invest in themselves, which is obviously the best investment that they can make over the long term. And again, it's a pretty weighty responsibility when you think about it. And especially in times like this, when we think about people, and I'll hit a couple slides later about media consumption as we see in the Angus audiences, but obviously people are more connected than they've ever been before. And if you're a fan of Apple News, or if you watch TV or listen to the radio, obviously today's world's messaging creating a lot of uncertainty for us. And so again, that's where our role really steps in. And we have an opportunity and a responsibility to step in to provide reassurance to people in the beef industry and certainly the ag industry. One of the great challenges we've seen as we go through this, and again, these rules are written in pencil this year. There's no doubt about that. But what we find that we're facing, especially this year, is a dual layer of uncertainty, which creates extra concern for us. Specifically, when we work with breeders, we're working with those breeders to help them better understand their marketing objectives, their goals, their communications efforts. And then we're also dealing with their uncertainty, and we're dealing with the uncertainty of their buyers. And so in a lot of ways, we hope to cascade this message through our breeders, through our customers, and ultimately get down to those that are absorbing the Angus genetics, and ultimately keep a healthy, robust system in place. And so like I mentioned, it's really our role and responsibility to guide people back into a growth mindset. I think that's been a real challenge for people lately. And it's easier said than done, no doubt. But I want to always make sure that everyone understands this is over a longer period of time. I mean, I know that we've been fighting some things here in the last few weeks internally, and obviously customers have too. There's no easy, quick answer for this. But I know that as we look for opportunities and stay growth minded, we're not going to flip a switch and be through with this. But if we stay growth minded, over time, we will absolutely overcome some of these challenges that we face today in terms of uncertainty. One thing that I think is really important as we talk to customers, it's really natural and really easy for them to not want to be engaging with their customers. And that is a really, really challenging, risky thing. I mean, your absence is absolutely noted in these times. And I know that in some cases people don't feel armed to have those conversations with their customers. But again, it's their responsibility to step in and be a leader within that relationship. As we look at that and we consider that, obviously no one wants to be sold to. And I think that as we look at the sales arena today, it's really about positioning your role alongside them in support and being a resource for them. A big part of that is certainly being proactive and reaching out. As you're dealing with this uncertainty, as you're dealing with this concern, in many cases, you've got to tackle that first, and the rest starts to fall into place once you can start to work your way through that. But of course, again, people don't want to be sold to. They don't want you to lead off immediately with the fact that you're asking for money. And so being able to position yourself as a resource is so very key for our staff and many others as we look at the ag industry in particular. One of the other thing that a lot of our guys have had great result in is just doing something positive and unexpected. Again, kind of shaking people out of some of these daily concerns, this daily grind that we're fighting, and looking for opportunities to do something just a little bit different, a little bit unique, to kind of set people off the course that maybe they've been fighting so far. And so as we start to look at what COVID-19 spending patterns are, again, thinking about your own personal habits, thinking about habits of your customers, people are trying to buy the essentials. And they're spending a little bit less money, for sure. But that's when we go back to our customers and say, okay, what determines what is essential? Is it our clients that we're selling advertising to, or is it ultimately their customers? And certainly there's a lot of differing perspectives on what is essential. And sometimes at the end of the day, we don't always think about advertising as essential, but obviously that's something we need to navigate into the conversation to help them understand the ways in which it truly is. If you look at our fiscal year from October 1st of 19 through July 1st, we had the value of about $226 million worth of Angus bulls sold. You don't stop an industry of that size. You know, it's going to find a way to evolve. It's going to find a way to continue on, particularly in the bull sale market. And I know Jason will have some great tips for that as we get into his presentation too. But again, this just echoes back to the fact that we have to be that resource and we have to help people guide our way through it. I know that we can do that, and I know that all of those in the ag industry are responsible for feeding the world and feeding our country. And so we know that we're going to help find the new path as we go through some of those things. Another really key point to think about, particularly when we're talking about our sales force and we're talking to folks that are selling Angus genetics, they have a 2-year investment in many of the things that they're thinking about marketing right now. And so we can't allow these shorter term fears to dictate our spending patterns. Instead, we need to use planning to help work our way through that. And we absolutely cannot cut back on customer service, outreach, and marketing. Again, thinking about over $240 million that we'll sell in Angus bulls this year, that market's going to find a way to evolve. And we have a significant investment, or our breeders do, in those genetics as we bring them to market. And so we want to be sure to coach people not to fall just short of the finish line and not to let the final piece of the equation, outreach, marketing, customer service, stop the ability to recoup the investments that they have there, which certainly with uncertainty is a very real risk. And so again, you know, one of the early things that we think about before we have these conversations, knowing that it's sensitive time and knowing it's sensitive subjects, you know, it's really good to know your audience when you're making that call. You know, have they been affected personally? That's absolutely going to dictate your tone. Do you know them well, or is this a fairly new call? We're really fortunate to have four really great new additions to the team within the last year, and the regional managers team, and they're doing a great job. And at the same time, they're Oop, can you hear all right?
I can hear you well.
Okay. I got a little audio feedback there, maybe from something, so. Double check messages here. You guys just pull me up if for some reason we're having trouble with internet, okay? And so are we thinking about a new call, or are we thinking about someone that we have an established relationship with? And again, that's a really key aspect as we're starting to frame up having that conversation with someone and adding to the reassurance of what we bring them as one of our customers. Another key area I think is really important, and it may not impact as many on the breeder side as much as some of our business development team, but are they working remotely? You know, that's something that's, again, changed a lot of our lives. And using video calls like this is a great way to be able to see their face, to gauge their response. We've got to bear in mind that the set of distractions is really unique this year compared to last year. They may have kids in the background. They may be trying to get off in a certain time frame in order to catch another Zoom call. So many different things that are a little bit different, and definitely bear our understanding as we're starting our approach and starting to have our calls. The other thing that's a little bit interesting for us to think about is, especially with business clients, you know, the normal times they'd prefer to talk to you may have really changed here. You know, they may be really only available in certain time frames due to childcare, due to other Zoom calls, whatever it may be. And so a lot of times we do try to flush that out as we're organizing time for important calls like what we're talking about in terms of providing this reassurance. And so again, some key things that we think about when we're making those calls. You know, we try to frame that phone call after the understanding of who we're talking to, and we're trying to understand how we can frame that in positivity and where that customer currently sits. You know, if you pick up the phone and call someone and say, hey, how you doing? And if you don't guide the narrative a little bit, well, how do you think I'm doing? I'm not doing great. You know, I mean, a lot of folks are really struggling from a revenue standpoint, in the ag media sector in all aspects of agriculture. In some cases, again, they're fighting COVID risk with their families. They're dealing with added stressors and frustrations. And so being open-ended when you start that conversation is a pretty slippery slope to allow it to get to places where you really don't want it to be. If you concentrate on negative aspects right in the offset, you're probably not going to end the call on a super positive note. And so we try to be really proactive with our tone. We try to use reassuring tone and words. We try to start that conversation with opportunity and visualization of more positive aspects to come. Again, knowing that we're going to evolve our way through this, knowing that that's our role and responsibility. Another aspect is to really understand that customer style. We have used DISC assessments pretty significantly here in the last year. I greatly encourage everyone to think about Myers-Briggs, DISC assessment, even just the basic knowledge of what their personality type is. Some folks need more time to process information. You should tailor your approach to that. Some folks prefer to really concentrate on a challenge and be very direct. You should recognize that in customers and get right to the point, and then be ready for them when they are looking for more information, but be able to deliver it in the means and communicating it to them in the way that their personality dictates. And that, again, really comes down to really understanding your customer and knowing your customer at the deepest level, or at least starting a conversation to better understand their style. And so again, for us, especially now, it's about staying connected with our customers. We're definitely here to build trust, not necessarily working on immediate sales. One common thing, and I'll touch on it later, is we're thinking about building advertising, integrated advertising campaigns and strategies. We don't even necessarily want to tell people that these efforts are what we're concentrating on for this fall or this spring sale. We instead pair that with the fact that they're creating genetics right now that they'll sell in 2 years. And right now is the time to start to build marketing plans and advertising plans to create an audience 2 years from now. Now, obviously, that builds over time. And there are things that we do, particularly of a digital nature, which allow us to get the word out very quickly. And we're absolutely selling bulls and females here in 2020. But at the same time, we challenge our customers to think about a 2-year and a 3-year marketing plan and know that that can always change and shift, but that we are there as a resource. And I think everyone can be that resource as we're working across many different media types, many different media companies in order to build success as we push through all the challenges that we face. And so that's another really key thing that we try to sit on. We don't necessarily want to visualize all the concerns which are on people's minds, but rather we start to visualize what it looks like on the other side of this crisis. And it doesn't matter if it's COVID or drought or flooding in the Dakotas or snowstorm. I mean, you take your pick. If you look at the last 3 years, we've had a crisis in every region of the country, and cattlemen are absolutely facing that on a near daily basis. And so we start to think about how we can utilize these tools of visualization, what that plan looks like in accordance to what their goals are on the other side of this, and then we work our way back in terms of our planning. And so what has been helpful for a lot of our staff, I know, is to build plans which are very nimble for near-term goals, as well as to consider what those long-term goals start to look like. And those really need to be based on what that customer wants to do. Again, challenging them to be growth-minded, challenging them to consider how we're going to be aspirational in those goals, how we're going to grow and develop them, and being really specific in what it is that they're trying to accomplish. Are they trying to increase their bull sale average, or are they trying to bring 50 new buyers into this registered female sale? The customer ultimately has to decide that, and then we're in a position to help them achieve that. One of the great things that we have here and many others have now is the ability to use different media types and their subsequent strengths to complement those different areas. So again, I'll touch on this a little later, but obviously there's still value in prints, particularly for long-term investments, brand building. We know it's a trusted resource, and we'll go into a few more things that it excels at later in the day, but then also digital and social media. And this is why we create integrated packages to allow these to overlap and utilize all the strengths while accomplishing kind of overlap of what some of the drawbacks can be. So obviously with digital, it's nimble, it's interactive, it's responsive. And we start to look for ways to tie those different strengths into both their short-term and long-term plans and goals. And of course, like any good sales aspect, you identify those challenges, you identify those goals, and you position your products as a means of achieving those. And we always have to remember, it doesn't really work well to have a short-term plan and a long-term plan and not have those flow together. If we really want to achieve what we can, we have to be sure that those dovetail together. And then a final aspect here, and certainly unify those messages. We want to have that brand recognition, that brand building that we're trying to accomplish from a long-term aspect, and also capitalize on the fact that we're using some short-term strategies and tie that look, feel, and messaging all together with the target market in order to get the ultimate result. And then of course, no plan is really going to be very effective if we don't ask for their involvement. So it's not all on us as marketers, it's not all on us as advertisers to go do all the work. Obviously there's things that we offer them that they can't get anywhere else, but in many, many cases, there's a very important component of that plan that needs to be identified for them, and they need to have a vested interest in it as well. And so just briefly, I'll talk a little bit about a couple surveys that we did here this spring. One was specifically for Angus bull buyers, and it was about 60 questions. And then we did a similar one for Angus breeders as well. And specifically, there was several things that we pulled out in terms of editorial and direction and strategy, and certainly understanding what those surveys mean for us in 2020. But one of the key things that I was most interested in was media consumption. And again, we know that we're consuming more media than ever before. Coming from a print background with Todd many years ago, and then also a digital marketing aspect as well, I came in and I had some preconceived notions on where we sat. It was interesting to me, print was still really dominant with the Angus bull buyer audience. And we see digital publications, internet-specific websites, social media, all these other aspects of digital value, they're growing. We have no doubt about that. But we didn't necessarily see that digital was displacing print. And that's a good aspect to remember as we're talking about integrated campaigns. Now, do these digital bars on the chart start to grow over the next 5, 10, 15 years? Absolutely, and for good reason. But again, I think that just goes to the underpinning of the fact that we're just consuming more media than ever before. And digital offers a lot of flexibility, a lot of mobile nature, and a lot of interactive nature. And we'll see those bars continue to creep up when we allow people to opt in for what their preference is on the different media types. And so that was the Angus bull buyer aspect. And this was the Angus breeder aspect. And again, you see still many of them predominantly using print in some form or fashion for news, information, and advertising. Again, as you'd expect to see, breeders a little heavier on the digital aspect, a little heavier on internet searches, digital publications, and social media. So again, anticipating that those bars continue to grow and anticipating that people continue to consume more media, and it's our responsibility as marketers to target the messaging, target the audience, and create integrated campaigns in order to best reach on behalf of our customers. Before I charge on, does anyone have any questions about those two? Does that strike anyone as interesting? I'll be honest, the print aspect surprised me just a little bit that it was so high, but briefly, does anyone have any thoughts on that? So when we think about print aspects, again, we've got some very definitive strengths. And again, I won't go through all these, but as we share that with customers, we bear in mind that print still offers a lot of good and benefit to us. But there's obviously some weaknesses too, as you can read on the screen. And that's again where we bounce back to an integrated campaign. Utilizing print for its strengths and recognizing some of the weaknesses that we find and supplementing digital to extend print and make up for some of those weaknesses, I think is a really valid thing to do in 2020. One other point I'll throw out there, this aspect of survey was absolutely an Angus audience. It could be very different in row crop audiences. It's obviously very different in different audiences that you see across the country. But we're pretty quick to point out that that is Angus survey audience for 2020. Now we're anticipating that change in the next 15 years or 20 years as we see a generational shift happening. But for us today, we're absolutely selling bulls in the near term and in the next few years. We see that a lot of our active, actionable audience that we're trying to reach, they're still older than me. The huge barrier to entry that cattlemen face to get in the beef industry, some of those aspects that we know that just takes time to build and create. A lot of the buyers that we're ultimately trying to target are 50 and older. And so a lot of these rules still dictate that we use print. But we should also be prepared to see that generational shift in the next 10 years, maybe 15. And we should also be always creating marketing plans which encompass everyone as we grow and develop new customers. And I know that's where digital kicks in. And I know Jason will have much better points on this than me, but it allows you to be so nimble and so immersive and so interactive in what you do. And as we start to see folks of my generation, 40-year-olds, 30-year-olds, come into a more secure buying aspect of the industry, obviously digital is going to be much more significant as we see that generational shift. Another really key aspect that we talk about just almost every day is the fact that we have really research-driven clients. And you don't always think about cattle producers, Angus breeders, as being research-driven. But if you take a big step back away from that and you think about what it is that they do, a lot of these guys will drive 200 miles to look at a set of bulls at a sale before they buy semen on the sire of those bulls. That's market research. A lot of times people will track and follow a program for 2 or 3 years before they decide to make an investment. And rightfully so. In many cases, they're spending $10,000, $20,000, $50,000, whether they're a bull buyer or a breeder, either one. And so we've got to respect the fact, again, going back to that 2 and 3 year marketing plan, that in cases it's going to take some time to win those folks over. But I know that we have to start that message today. And I know that even though we're at a time of COVID, that we as marketers and advertisers, we have to be prepared to go gain market share and aggressively seek it. Because we know that advertising is one of the very few things that you can do if you have a bull sale that offers residual value. If you want to DNA test your cattle, that's fantastic. But if you DNA test your sale offering, you can watch that investment get on the trailer one bull at a time. Advertising offers that residual value, which continues to play out over the next 2 to 3 years, if we do it the right way. And again, that's just where we start to task ourselves in thinking about those customer plans over a long period of time. And I touched on this earlier, but again, if you can start to capitalize on the fact that people are planning their genetics 2 and 3 and 5 years out, and they're creating those plans today, and match that with their marketing and advertising and outreach plans, we find a lot more effectiveness in what we do. And so a few other pretty common things, again, being accessible at any time, I think, is probably more important than it's ever been before. And we don't have a shortage of that, certainly, of those of us on this call. And obviously with technology and everything else that we have at our disposal, being accessible is just a cost of doing business now, today in 2020. Being able to be really nimble in what we do, even though we work very hard at developing plans and understanding those different things, is key, I think, as we're facing some of these challenges that are ahead. I heard a great quote. I can't remember who actually provided it, but it was, don't fall in love with your plan. That doesn't mean you don't have a plan to begin with, but always be ready to adjust on the fly. That plan provides the reassurance, but there's even added reassurance when you, as a resource for that customer, have the ability to be nimble, recognize when something works or doesn't work, and make the necessary adjustments on the fly. And then, of course, in agriculture, utilizing customer peers. I mean, we've done this for ages, and it's never been more relevant than it is today. And when we think about that reassurance aspect, we don't have the coffee shop anymore. You know, it used to be you could go into the coffee shop and you could look around and you could say, that guy looks like an idiot. And I'm not going to take beef industry advice from him, but that guy, I think, knows what he's talking about. And so you were able to kind of glean that information from people that you knew and trusted. On social media, we don't have that luxury. The guy that is kind of an idiot, people listen to him just as much as they do to the experts. And so we need to do a better job of certainly utilizing customer peers that are there on our behalf, and also know that that's going to provide a ton of reassurance for our customers as we march through this. And one of the key takeaways I think that we have top of mind here, particularly as we go into this fall and as we go through any kind of a crisis, is there's opportunity and there's lost opportunity. So market share will be gained and market share will be lost. And it's really up to the client to determine if they want to stay growth minded and if they want to go gain market share and advance through this, or if they want to be more protectionist and shirk back, you know? And so wise investments in a very targeted, efficient approach and an organized approach will absolutely make those clients more likely to gain. I know as we talk about selling, you have to be so very proud and knowledgeable about your products. You absolutely have to believe in them, and you have to be able to offer that up as a solution to some of the challenges that people are going through. And again, we touched on this earlier, but not making investments in advertising, not making investments in outreach and customer service will likely end up with market share loss once we visualize and see ourselves on the other side of these crises. And so again, we go back to the idea of building these relationships and helping these folks position themselves securely now and today so that we can see that grow and develop over time. So when conditions do improve, we're the first out of the gate, or they are the first out of the gate as a client with their buyers. That's such an important part, again, of visualizing what it looks like and being prepared on the other side when these things start to work themselves through. And so again, kind of another point there, which I touched on earlier, a huge amount of investments made, whether you're a breeder, whether you're a corporate client. We've got all these programs and products that have had investments made. And if we don't conduct an appropriate plan, outreach, and action, we really run the risk of seeing lost opportunities and, worse yet, losing market share. And as we think about what COVID has meant to us as marketers, again, budgets have shifted. You know, I know those of us that are selling advertising are finding new wells of revenue because there aren't trade shows. You know, Angus canceled our trade show this week. And so we are looking for more opportunities to provide that outreach for those customers in different ways. We know that having less in-person events, having a lot less travel, having a lot less face-to-face means that they've invested a lot less dollars in those aspects. And so being able to repurpose those budgets for those customers and allow them to use advertising and outreach in digital ways, especially today, are so key in replacing that rather than just sitting on that revenue or sitting on that investment revenue and not utilizing it. And so David Stanley, I borrowed this equation from David Stanley, a friend of mine that does a great job in marketing, but relevance times repetition creates results. And it's a great motto to remember that if you've got a highly relevant product to a customer at the moment, you won't need much repetition in advertising in order to get results. And yet, if we're thinking about growing through some of these challenges, growing through some of the concern and uncertainty, we've got to bear in mind that repetition sure may need to increase because it may not seem overly relevant at that exact time. And so again, I think this is absolutely an area that whether you're in a crisis mode or not, it's something very important to remember. And repetition, targeted repetition to a targeted audience, is sometimes very much needed from a brand building exercise. And it's important for clients to understand how their products factor into that. And so as we talk to those folks that are selling genetics, selling products, we recognize that their competitors also aren't getting face-to-face with those potential customers they're trying to court. And so it's really important that they take charge of those relationships and leverage that fact and continue to build trust and utilize it to increase their business. So that's all I had for slides here today, guys. Absolutely, I think we'll have a Q&A afterwards, but if there's nothing immediate, I'm really delighted to turn it over to Jason and hear some of Jason's thoughts and perspectives on some of the great tools and options that they provide, as well as strategies for digital marketing. Jason?
Okay, I'm trying to get it turned over. Thank you, Brett, and good job. Okay, thank you, everybody. Jennifer said earlier that I can tell you a little bit about my title, and I don't know what all to say except I grew up on a purebred Hereford ranch in the Panhandle of Texas that's been family owned and operated since 1904. I graduated from Texas A&M with a degree in animal science in May of 2006. I've been with Superior Livestock since then. I manage their purebred division. On Superior, we broadcast about 200 production sales a year, primarily larger bull sales that target the commercial world. We purchased liveauctions.tv in November of 2016. We do closer to 600 production sales on that a year. We're close to launching a 2.0 version, a completely new and revamped platform on September 1, so here just in a few days. I'm also a co-founder and co-partner of Smart Auctions, which is a timed auction platform that sells cattle, closes out racehorse style, but really targets the seed stock industry. We do probably close to 200 sales on that a year right now. And I'm a marketing director for the American Rancher and manage our progressive genetics program, which is a program on Superior Livestock that identifies low lots of cattle selling that are sired by bulls bought direct from top seed stock producers. And then, of course, I'm also a Hereford breeder and very involved in Barber Ranch. My two brothers and my sister took that over legally and financially back in May of 2015, I believe. And anyway, really helped with the marketing, kind of the overall direction of that. So I'm trying to get this to move. So, knowing that the topic today is selling in COVID, I definitely want to get into that, even though, this spring, to me, seeing all these bull sales and all these big production sales around the country, the planning and the stress leading up to sale day was really intense. But overall, the bull sales were very good, whether there was an audience or whether there wasn't an audience. Before I get into a whole lot on how COVID has affected it, I just wanted to run through some just basic marketing tips. And I'll tell you, being as involved in marketing cattle as I am, I'm always getting phone calls from people, whether they're really successful marketers to people that are trying to get going and try to get their footing and try to build a brand, and just, sometimes getting the basic understanding of marketing and what all goes into it, is tougher to explain to some people. The successful people realize it. The people that are getting started, they're battling obscurity, so they need help with that. But, with all that said, I kind of want to give you my basic marketing tips, the same ones that I share with producers and then my family. I mean, we've got a big line of credit tied to our names, and, we're like a lot of mom and pop and seed stock producers out there, and the fact that we need to get cattle in the bank. And, we did the same thing everyone else did back in 2014 and 2015 when cattle sold really, really high. We bought more land and more equipment, and then the prices fell, but the expenses stayed the same. So, we're always trying to do a better job marketing and selling and bringing in more revenue to outpace our expenses. And, COVID definitely complicates that. And, that's just part of our industry and where we're at today. But a lot of the stuff I'm going to tell you, Brett definitely touched on. I believe big tip in marketing is you have to treat it as a year-round effort. Proper marketing makes you money versus costs you money. I've always been a big believer that you've got to spend money to make money. And just going back to a guy that Monty Souls, he's the head of the Shorthorn Association right now, but a big part of when I started with Superior, he was running Star Lake there in Oklahoma, and they had one of the biggest marketing budgets. They also had by far the best participation on sale day. They're one of the best marketers the Hereford breed had ever seen. And, it's definitely reflected in the prices they bought. But he was always a big person in consistent repetition in marketing, like Brett said. And he told me one morning we were driving through cows, and he said, the biggest way if you want to be a big marketer and a good one in this industry is, he goes, it's the same thing that other industries have figured out already. He said, every morning when you wake up and you turn on the news, or you jump in the pickup and you turn on the radio, he goes, say you hear a ad for a Ford pickup dealership every morning on the radio or on the television. He goes, you may not be ready to buy right then. He said, when it comes time to actually make a purchase, he goes, where do you think the first place you're going to go check out is? He goes, maybe you don't buy from it, but the first place you're going to go to is where you've seen that ad every single morning or once a week, or had it consistent in front of you. To me, it's the same thing in marketing cattle. You've got to do it as a year-round deal. I tell the guys that work for me, consistent effort yields consistent results. It's the same thing in marketing. And then a big part of this, and Brett talked on this earlier, is you got to be accessible. If it takes you 2 weeks to call somebody back, you're probably not retaining that business. And then, network and grow relationships. I mean, that's what it's all about. That takes a lot of effort, and it's not something that's done overnight, but it is a process that you have to go through. As far as basic marketing, I'm a very big believer in professional sale management. I'm a bigger believer in that on female sales than bull sales, and I'll get into that in a little bit, but big believer in that. And then, professional sale day staff. I want the auctioneer and the ringmen that work together consistently, and that they make their primary income and living from marketing purebred cattle. So, big believer in sale management and professional sale day staff. Know your target audience and advertise accordingly. I'm going to try to speed through a little bit of these basic tips but when we get into talking about bull sales versus female sales, I'll go into a little more detail on that. The advertising, I'm a very big believer in multiple avenues. As Brett said, print is still really big. We see that here at Superior Livestock. We're North America's largest cattle merchandiser right now, and we've spent the last 30 days marketing 400,000 head of feeder calves. I just spent all last week in Sheridan, Wyoming, and we still send out print catalogs for every one of these sales, and they're thick catalogs, and that is absolutely one of the biggest pieces of overhead that we've had, that we've looked for solutions for 10 years to try to get away from. But as Brett said, your average rancher is 50 years or older, and they still like having a print catalog that they can look at. So that's a challenge facing our industry right now. We are about to go to having an auction every week and go into digital catalogs, except for our really large summer sales. But we're still kind of waiting to see how that's going to go. But for advertising, like utilizing print ads, e-blasts, web banner ads. I told you earlier, I'm a marketing director for the American Rancher television series. That's one of the top 3 shows that's broadcast on the RFD TV. That's also a very good marketing piece for Seaside guys right now, and my family utilizes that. One of the biggest tips on marketing right now is videotape cattle ahead of sale day. I don't think I got to go a whole lot of detail into that, but I would tell you, before you use any type of online company to broadcast a sale, before you did anything, that is one of the key pieces right now. And when I started with the company 14 years ago, it seemed like people would come to these bull sales and they'd get there at 8 a.m. and they would go through everything and look at all the cattle. And, it's starting to shift to everyone's videotaping the cattle ahead of time. And even before the pandemic of coronavirus, buyers were getting online. They were going through the cattle, looking at the pedigrees, the EPDs, whatever data points they want, and they're looking at the videos and narrowing their list ahead of time. And then they'd show up the morning of the sale day, and they'll still go through and look at the ones they're interested in. But the videotaping part of it ahead of time is such a tool in marketing right now. Then professional pictures, especially with pandemic right now. I mean, there's less people coming on sale day, less people coming to the ranch ahead of time. So there's some really talented people in our industry right now taking pictures. And growing up and in college, I thought I could take great pictures. And I'll tell you, I'm nowhere close to the people that dedicate their profession to do that and do it every day. So definitely a big believer. I mean, there's just so many good options in our industry right now on that. Then the online sale broadcasting, regardless of which company you choose to broadcast with right now, especially with pandemic and less people traveling, to me, this one's a must. So I would definitely, pick one that you believe has a lot of value for you and your operation, and do it, because really you're promoting yourself on that, but you're also doing a service to your customers. When I first started with Superior, it seemed like a lot of people, especially some of the sales staff, was apprehensive about using an online sales broadcasting company because they wanted people to be there in the stands. They didn't want them staying home to bid online. And to me, that was never the name of the game of this. It wasn't about giving people an excuse to stay home. It's about bringing in new business through an alternative form of advertising promotion, but also touching people that were too busy or couldn't make it there further away, that you would not get if you didn't use a service like that. So obviously I'm a big believer in that. And then sale day, and I'll get into this a little bit more detailed when we get to these type of auctions, but know the market, have your homework done before the sale starts. And one that I'll talk about a lot here in a minute is going to be soft and adaptable floors. This is the second slide of my basic marketing. I'm a big believer in raising cattle in good management, that are kept at the right time of the year to be able to sell them. In my opinion, in the Hereford breed and the Angus breed, January, February, especially bull calves, that's the most valuable product you can raise right now, especially when you consider, cattle that are born June or July in the summer, or November, December. When we're doing all our ET work, and we do a lot of stuff with Transova and do a lot of ET work year round, we want to target our calves to where those ET calves are born during the time of the year when they're most valuable, which means we don't like to calve bulls past about March that are ETs, and we don't calve hardly anything in the summertime. And I don't like having cattle born in November and December, just because I know those other months there's more value there. Next point on here, the genomics and horn poll test. Obviously, y'all can tell that I've got a Hereford background on here. I've kind of adapted this from a presentation I gave at the Hereford Marketing Summit conference last summer, but I think genomics are a huge deal right now. And, it also takes some thought. You see so many people, they do genomics, but they don't do it far enough ahead of their sale that, they've got to put a catalog together and they don't have the genomics back. And then they sell something, and a week later, somebody buys it. Those numbers change big time. In the basic management and marketing here, do genomics ahead of time. There's basically a tagging gun that can take a whole lot of an ear right now and put in a capsule, that you can do when you first tag the calf. You can use that same hole to put a tag in. But to me, that's a great time to do that. And Herefords, I believe in the horn poll test. Commissions paid to marketing agents, standard in our industry is paying 5%. If someone helps you sell something, some of those better marketers, they're going to charge you a little bit more, and maybe some travel and some other stuff, but 5% is kind of the rule of thumb. Manage your mailing list is another big, just basic marketing tip to me. You're going to have people, if you use an online service, that are going to sign up that you've never registered for anything before. You'll have new people that come to the sale. It's imperative that you take these lists and merge it into your own database. Video only auctions, I'm a believer in a lot of instances on that, and I'll come back to that one later. Put the adaptation from websites to Facebook. I'm still a very big believer in websites, and I think it's imperative that you have that, but to not think that excitement and the interactive parts of Facebook can really help market stuff is not paying attention, in my opinion. This one's very basic. Anything that's partnership animal, always get a contract on. In that contract, have partner payouts defined, and then when you pay out partners in settlement sheets, sell expense percentages. I can get into that a little bit more on bull sales versus female sales. And then, another thing, brand steal sales. So if you're someone new to the industry, if you're battling security, you can do all the perfect marketing in the world, but you're still not going to have the same results on day one that someone that's been selling or having the same production sale every year for 30 years is going to have. So, going into a virtual world and selling, I think it's everything I said earlier, but it's big time amplified right now. So to me, the pictures and the videos, they're just a lot more important, for the reasons I said earlier, but you're having less people come ahead of sale time and less people on sale days. So, get professional pictures and videos of stuff. So just because you take a picture or a video doesn't mean it's a good one, and that's going to help you market. But good professional ones, when you've got quality to offer, is such a important strategy these days. And then, I think the guarantees are more important. I think with people not coming to look at stuff ahead of time, they're going to look at ranches and companies that do the best job with customer service. And these ones that do the better job with customer service, they've got, they do break soundness exams on everything. And then they've got really strong breeding, first season guarantees. And then if you buy a female from somewhere, that if it doesn't breed, they're gonna stand behind it. So, if you're gonna have a sale, you definitely need to do a BSE on it, whether it's an online only sale, whether it's a regular auction. You have a at least a first breeding season guarantee, and you need to offer some fertility guarantees on females. And then obviously I said this earlier, but work with an online bidding service, and this is not only helping promote your product, but you're also offering a service to your customer, especially in a time where they don't know what all the restrictions are on social distancing, you travel, everything else. So, to me, that one's a must. And then maybe even consider a video only auction. I know Wolf Cattle Minnesota came down and did a video only auction with us here in Fort Worth. They utilized the same studio and room that we used for our big feeder calf sales. And what that basically was a auctioneer block setup with a bunch of TVs. Their auctioneers came here, their sales staff came here, but they didn't have traditional ringmen, and they didn't have a big crowd here at all. They really didn't have a crowd at all. And it was probably their smoothest and best sale they've ever had. And they called me here recently and said, even if we don't have any COVID pandemic next year, we're still going to come back to Superior and do this. And to be honest, they used both Superior and DV auctions that day, and both services were really, really busy and competitive the whole time, and it definitely elevated the sale. The next thing I would say, be aware of the market and climate pandemic conditions. Last fall, it sure seemed like as prices were a little unsteady across the board, a lot of bull sales probably had 15 to 20 bulls too many. A lot of them probably could have, pulled the bottom end or a little bit tougher on that. And I think you've got to be aware of what the inventory and cows out there and people buying everything looks like on that. And then this use soft and adaptive floors. My family, we have this argument every year before our bull sale, the morning of the bull sale. We come in there and we think, okay, we've got this many bulls, we've got these players here, and we want the sale to average $5,000 today. So big question is, what's going to be the floor? And to me, as a seller, you always have the right to have whatever floor you want on the cattle, but I like to be very realistic on that. And I like the floors. If we say we want to average $5,000, but we don't want to sell a bull underneath 3,500, those are going to be soft and adaptive floors, meaning if all of a sudden we've caught 6 or 7 bulls at 3,500, that floor's probably dropping to 2,500. Or maybe the front end of the sale's gone really good, and bulls that we thought were going to average 4 average 5,500. At that point, does it really matter if you let a few go at 2,750 if you're above whatever it is? So that's what I mean on using soft and adaptive floors. But you have to play some of that by ear. At the end of the day, when we're marketing cattle, I want to get them in the bank when the sale's over with, because we've already put so much time and expense and management into getting them to that point. And then, the other thing about, selling in a virtual world right now, more data is definitely better. I mean, I'm a big believer in having those genomics done ahead of time. If it's a bull sale, I'm definitely a big believer in having scan data, having the IMF and rib area done. In bull sales, I guess I look at it as ideal marketing. I think that you always have to have a presence year round, but where we really amplify for a bull sale, our advertisements is closer to sale day for 2 reasons, because there's some publications we feel has a really good hold in the commercial world, but 2, we also need, ring staff and ringmen there on sale day. So, there's multiple reasons on how we do what we do there. Then, on a bull sale, or really any sale, you want momentum at the start of that. You don't want to run lot 1 in there and then struggle to sell it. So a big way to counter that, in my opinion, is to have an order on sale day. So I work with a lot of our Superior Livestock reps who, rep commercial cattle for other people. I try to make sure I've got some guys that are either repeat customers or new customers that say, hey, I'm good for 5 bulls at 5,000. They have this birth weight and this kind of growth on them, or whatever their criteria is. But if you have orders, it helps build momentum on sale day. And then also, if you get in a tougher spot, you can combat that better with an order. Then I've already covered this one a little bit. Beware of the market and climate inventory conditions. Professional sale day staff. Again, I like having a good auctioneer that works with the same set of ringmen consistently throughout the year, because I think those guys are professional, communicate well, and just do a really good, smooth job on sale day. Catalog order versus sell order. On bull sales, I like selling them in catalog order. And that means that you basically have to do your sell order when you lay out the catalog. You want the top end of the bull selling right at the start, and you want bulls that are going to have a lot of friends on sell day there at the start. You don't, again, you don't want to start with ones that are going to struggle, but you know, that kind of thoughts put together when you put the catalog together. And then again, I want ultrasound data. And then I touched on it a minute ago on the video sales with Wolf doing it. I am definitely a believer in video only sales for bull sales. I think that goes really well for multiple reasons. I think you have less liability from an injury standpoint. It takes less labor. I think you can see if the cattle are good quality and video professionally, you can see the cattle as well or better than you can in the ring when they're running around blowing snot. But that's on bull sales. On female sales, I still think it's the opposite. I believe on female sales, buyers buy more off emotion than they do on a bull sale. And I like seeing them come through the ring. On these registered female sales, you know, I believe that you really have to have your homework done and all the data laid out. When you're selling, you know, a big female sale, people are going to ask you for the flush records on the donors. If the cows are to the age to be bred back, and you have a preg check done on them, you know, prior to sale day. There's just a lot of management that goes into that. I didn't talk about sale management in bull sales because I'm not as big of a believer in sale management on the bull sales as I am female sales. And I know that people use sale managers for different reasons, whether it's just they need more organization, they need, you know, more expert advice for people that are dealing with selling cattle year round or what. But in a registered female sale, I'm really a big believer in this. And I like to have someone come in that helps do the pictures and the catalog and organizes it, tells us where to advertise and when to advertise and when we need to have this done and this done and this done. Now, I think just on the female sales, and you know, in a lot of female sales, you're selling to other guys within the seed stock and the purebred industry versus commercial guys. So to me, the money spent on sale management is definitely made back in the job that's done for it. One thing, female sales, if you get to where you have a female sale once a year or any type of sale, really, if you're marketing cattle year round, you need to plan to picture cows when they're wet. And that's a big effort we make at Barber Ranch, especially in the springtime. And when those cows are wet, we're going to go slick them off 3 or 4 days ahead of time so the lines come out of their sides, and then we're going to go get a good picture of them when they're wet. And not just because we're selling that cow this year, but maybe we're going to have some type of sell next year that they'll go in, or we're going to have a big time bull or heifer calf we're going to market this fall, and we need a picture of the dam to show what her udder looks like and you know what the mom is on that one. Splits versus pairs, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, but you know, if you watch these really successful female sales right now, if the cows and the calves are old enough for the calves to wean or borderline, they'll run the cow and the calf in there and offer choice. And it's funny because, you know, they'll take the cow for $3,500 and then, you know, the calf for $2,500, and then you've got a $6,000 pair, versus you run a pair and they're by themselves, you know, maybe they bring $4,500, but it's always amazed me how splits they can add up on sale day. And then as far as sell orders go, definitely a big believer in sell orders on female sales. I'm not as big of a believer in catalog order, just so I think you jump around so much and it takes so much more planning because of different types of scenarios you're selling on female sales. And then, you know, just putting my ideal time of year for certain sales, you know, if it's open heifer calves, my family, if they're fallborns, we're going to sell them in April. That's when you see the majority of the Hereford, you know, open heifer calf sales are. And then if it's springborns, we're going to sell them in October. You know, I'd love to get them into November where they're a little more mature and got a little more hair on them, but the Texas validation deadline is November 1, so we're mindful of that. If we're going to have a big cow sale at the ranch, we like to have it either in May or September, just because of the maturity of both springborns and fallborns and how they hit that time of year and the shape the cows are in. And if y'all want more explanation on that, when I get through these slides at the end, I can answer whatever question you have. Then the online live cattle sales, this is the one where I'm talking about. It's a online only, there's no auctioneer. So Smart Auctions, that's the company that I own with a few buddies. And anyway, I've learned a lot about this since having this, but this online live cattle sales is becoming more and more popular in the seed stock industry every year, and that business has grown quite a bit here recently. But the big thing that we're seeing, and this is even before coronavirus hit, so obviously it's even more important now, but even before, people were getting online and they're buying these cattle without ever coming to the ranch and without ever seeing them. So the first time that they see anything is after they've purchased it and after it's either picked up or delivered. So because of that professional photos are even more important in my opinion. And then of course the videos are important. But one thing that I want to caution about, and I don't want to go into a lot of detail in these next two, but something that I can see as a little bit of a black eye in our industry from time to time are the photos and the videos need to match. You see these great photos of these animals selling, and then you look at the video and you're like, how's that even the same animal? And you need to be mindful of this. And then the age of the cattle, we see cattle sell, and then someone's bought 5 heifers from 5 different operations. They're all marches, and one comes in 400 pounds heavier than the other one. And I'm not saying there's always foul play there, because there's not. I mean, sometimes it's just natural performance, but you need to be mindful of that if people are purchasing things sight unseen, that it's as honest as it can be. And then, the next part is just customer service on these online sales. I sold a heifer to Brent Meeks at Upstream Ranch one time here a few years ago, and we loaded her on the truck, and he got her and he texted me and said, "Hey, Barber, why the hell didn't you dehorn that heifer before you sent her to me?" And I even think about that, but that is part of customer service. And anything that we sell before it's delivered from the ranch, we surgically dehorn it and make sure it's halter broke and everything else. Ideal times of year to have these sales, I've already kind of hit on that. One thing that I do like on these online auctions is the racehorse style auction is there is no sale order. They all close at one time, which means that if you've got a family that's bidding on one animal and it gets past their price range, their next favorite one hasn't sold yet. So they can drop off to that one. And I'm not going to say it makes them bring more money at the start of the sale, but I think it elevates the ones towards the bottom third of the sale to bring in more money. Then the additional advertising on these online auctions, looking at the ones we do, you can almost go down the list and tell the ones that were advertised as a proper auction. They advertise it in the Angus Journal or the Hereford World, or they did a catalog or flyer or mailed something out, because the ones that are treated as a real auction still have by far the most success. And my last point on this one is the most successful auctions don't rely solely on the internet bidding platform. So you still have to do a level of marketing outside of expecting the platform to provide all that for you. And then the frozen genetic sales, which we're seeing a lot. Just put on here, the time of year is very important. Obviously, if you're going to sell semen and embryos, let's get it right ahead of the breeding season than at the end of it, because by the end of it, people have made up their minds on what they're flushing to, what embryos they're putting in. Big point here is you have to have pictures of the sires and dams. You just go try to list a set of embryos or semen on something and you don't have any sire dam pictures, they're not going to sell, or not going to sell well. Maximum number of embryos and semen per lot. If you're going to sell semen online, I like to do it in groups of 5 or 10. And when people buy semen, they like to have it shipped in canes typically. So that makes logical sense in groups of 5 or 10. On embryos, you typically see from, groups 4 to 6 embryos at a time, sometimes 3 or 4 embryos. I've got mixed baskets or tanks. If we've got a lot of semen that has no value, or a bunch of, maybe one embryo this sire, one embryo that sire, we'll put them together in what we call baskets and sell maybe 4 embryos or 5 embryos out of 3 different sires. Typically, there's not a guarantee on something like that. If it's a lot of units of semen that's no value, we may sell the entire tank and start at $10 and just hope to get it off storage. Then one location for inventory is preferred. If my family does a frozen genetic sale, we're going to have all the semen and embryos shipped to one place. It just makes the management so much easier. And then a big one for these online frozen genetic sales, you need to have conception guarantees, and you need to find that. You need to have a surplus of whatever mating you sell to cover the guarantee. And this is one I've seen a lot of people get in a lot of trouble on. They'll sell a set of embryos, and then they'll put the rest of that mating in, and then something won't stick, and they've got to come back and come up with other ones, and they don't have it. So if you're going to do that, have a surplus, or if they're not going to be guaranteed, definitely state it. But the one thing that I'll also tell you, if you're going to sell frozen genetics online, release and split those embryos immediately once it's paid for. And I've seen this with my own family. We have embryos sell. Well, someone takes 120 days to pay for it. Well, we forget to call in there. We haven't called in there and released and split the embryos yet. So the best thing to do is just go ahead and call Transova or whoever and put those embryos under their name. But they don't pay for it, and then they get put in at the ranch, and then that's a problem. So, definitely put a deadline of when to pick up. Then the last one I'm going to touch on just briefly is private treaty sales. And there's still a lot of people that, sell cattle private treaty year round, regardless of coronavirus or whatever. But I'm a big believer in know what price you want for your cattle, and that it's not your customer's responsibility to come to your place and price your cattle. If you sell in private treaty, you still need to do BSE and whatever proper health protocols there are for your herd in your area. And then discuss your breeding season guarantee with your potential buyer. And then if you do a partnership animal, always do a contract on it. I don't care if that's through a sale, private treaty, whatever. You do a contract on something that saves for hard feelings later down the road. So anyway, I know I kind of ran through a lot of stuff pretty quick, but I wanted to get through that. And if y'all have got questions on it, now would be a great time.
Well, thank you guys so much. We really appreciate you joining us today. I hate to say this, but because of time, I'm probably going to have to move this on. But I did make sure that I added your emails into the chat so everybody could get a chance to see them. You've kept your crowd the whole time, so I know they're really interested, and I highly encourage you guys to reach out to Brett and Jason to ask those questions, because they're a great resource. And again, we're so grateful you were able to join us and share this information, and we will make it available to share on social as well. I wanted to let you guys know that our next session is going to be September 16th. Stand out on social media with Steva Robinson and Sarah Kober. So I hope you guys can join us again, and everybody have a great day, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks again, Brett and Jason.
Thank you.